DevaCurl used to be one of the most trusted brands in the curly hair space. It was actually the first brand I used when I went natural. And for a lot of us, it really helped shape how we learn to care for our curls through things like the Curly Girl Handbook and curl specific routines. But as the company grew, there were changes happening behind the scenes that, looking back, felt like early signs of what was coming. So today, we're going to look at how DevaCurl built its reputation, what led to that shift, and what happened after.
Curly hair is like a flower. Each one of these little strands is like a stem of a
To
plant.
understand what happened, you have to go back to the beginning. And that really starts with Lorraine Massey. Lorraine Massey is often considered one of the pioneers in the curly hair space. Her work focused on understanding and working with natural texture at a time when most of the industry was still centered around straightening. Over the years, she worked with thousands of clients, studying how curly hair behaves and developing techniques specifically for it. In 1994, she co founded the first Devachan Salon in New York City alongside Dennis De Silva. The salon was specifically designed for curly hair, and it became a space where techniques, routines, and products for curls were developed and refined. At the time, that kind of focus on texture hair was not common. Then, in 1999, she published Curly Girl, the Handbook, which was later updated and re released in the early 2000s. The book introduced what became known as the Curly Girl method, a simplified approach to caring for curls through cleansing, conditioning, and styling. It also introduced the idea of cutting curls in their natural dry state, which later became a defining part of her approach. Even though the method had been around for years, it didn't really gain widespread popularity until around 2010 to 2011, when more people began transitioning to natural hair and looking for guidance online. For a lot of people, that book became the blueprint to how to care for curly hair. And that's actually how I was introduced to a lot of this. I found out about it through YouTube, through Sunkissed Alba, now Alba Ramos, and I started my natural hair journey right alongside her. Around that same time, DevaCurl as a product line began to take shape, building directly off the methods developed in the salon and the book. In 2002, the brand launched its first no poo cleanser, which became a key part of their approach and helped introduce sulfate free routines to a wider audience. Early on, the routine was intentionally simple. It focused on just a few core products: a no poo cleanser, a leave in conditioner, and a gel. The idea was that you didn't need a long list of products, you just needed the right technique and an understanding of how your curls behave. And I think that simplicity is a big part of why people trusted the brand. It felt like there was a clear method behind it. By 2007, the brand expanded into education by establishing an academy to train stylists in their techniques. This is where the Diva Cut became more widely recognized. The Diva Cut is a curl by curl cutting method done on dry hair, where each curl is shaped based on how it naturally falls. And that was very different from traditional cutting methods, which typically focused on wet hair and uniform sections. As the brand grew throughout the late 2000s and into the 2010s, Devachan salons expanded, primarily in New York, and their products became more widely available beyond salon spaces. Over time, DevaCurl became one of the most recognizable names in the curly hair space. By this point, the salon, the book, and the product line had all contributed to changing how many people learn to care for their natural curls. For a lot of people, this was their first introduction to curl specific routines and education. But behind the scenes, the company was also evolving. In 2013, DevaCurl was acquired by a private equity firm. That same year, Lorraine Massey parted ways with the brand. She later continued developing her approach through her own company, Curly World. We'll come back to that later. And in my opinion, that's where the direction of the brand really started to change. Up until that point, DevaCurl had been built around a very specific philosophy that came directly from its founder. After 2013, the company continued to grow, and so did its product line. The original three step routine gradually expanded into multiple cleansers, conditioners, stylers, and treatments designed for different curl types and styling goals. By 2017, that shift was much more noticeable. Instead of choosing between just a few products, People now had multiple cleansers, different gels, styling creams, deep conditioners, and specialized treatments to choose from. I remember trying these products around 2017 after my mini big shop when they started showing up in kits at places like Sephora. And I did like some of the products, especially the masks, but the routine started to feel a lot less simple than it originally was. By 2019, DevaCurl had become one of the most recognizable curly hair brands on the market. Its products were widely available through retailers like Sephora and Ulta. Influencers and hairstylists regularly feature the brand, and videos documenting diva cuts have become a trend on YouTube. For many people, getting a diva cut wasn't just a haircut, it was an experience. By then, DevaCurl had grown far beyond its original salon roots. It had become one of the biggest names in the curly hair industry. But towards the end of that year, the conversation began to change. Some consumers began sharing their experiences online, describing issues like dryness, excessive shedding, and changes in how their hair responded to the products. At first, these were individual stories, but they quickly gained momentum. As more people shared their experiences, the conversation spread across YouTube and social media. One of the most widely viewed videos came from Aisha Malik, whose story brought even more attention to the brand. What had started as scattered reports had now become one of the biggest conversations in the curly hair community. And this is where things really changed, because now people weren't just talking about routines or results. They were questioning the brand itself. As the conversation grew, it eventually led to legal action. In 2020, a class action lawsuit was filed against DevaCurl with claims related to product safety and alleged damage to hair and scalp. The company denied those claims, maintaining that its products were safe and met industry standards. Regardless of the legal outcome, public perception had already changed. Many consumers stopped using the products, and some salons and stylists also began moving away from the brand. For a company that had built its reputation on trust and education, that shift was significant. The conversation was no longer just about how the products performed. It was about whether people still believed in the brand. And once that trust is questioned, it's very hard to rebuild. The controversy also changed the broader curly hair market. As consumers looked for alternatives, newer brands had more opportunities to grow. Smaller independent companies, along with celebrity backed hair care lines, entered a market where consumers were more willing to try something different. The curly hair market was changing. A brand that had once led the conversation was now competing in a much more crowded space. And instead of setting the direction of the industry, DevaCurl had become one brand among many. From that point on, people no longer look at the brand the same way. But DevaCurl didn't disappear. Its story was simply entering a new chapter. DevaCurl is still in business today. The brand has reformulated products, updated its packaging, and continues to sell through major retailers. While the company looks different today, it remains part of the curly hair industry. The original Devachan Salon model has largely scaled down, and the brand is no longer centered around those in person salon experiences. Today, much of its education and styling guidance is shared online, continuing parts of the system it originally built. The lawsuits were eventually settled in 2022, with the company continuing to deny wrongdoing. Earlier, I mentioned that Lorraine Massey stepped away from DevaCurl in 2013. After leaving DevaCurl, Lorraine went on to create Curly World, where she continued building on the same philosophy she had introduced years earlier. Her approach has remained focused on understanding how curls naturally behave, keeping routines simple, and working with rather than against your natural texture. She also continued sharing that philosophy through books, education, and hands on training for stylists. Today, she still teaches through the Curly World Training Academy, works directly with clients through her studio in New York, and shares education through her podcast, If Your Curls Could Talk. Looking at both paths, it's interesting to see how differently they evolved. While DevaCurl expanded into a much larger product system, Lorraine's work remained centered on the same foundational ideas that shaped the brand from the beginning. Even years later, the foundation of her approach has remained largely the same. It still emphasizes understanding how your hair behaves and building a routine around that. And to me, that consistency says a lot because even years later, the foundation of her approach hasn't really changed. is still centered around understanding your hair instead of relying on more and more products. At the end of the day, I don't think this story is just about DevaCurl. It's a reminder that brands change over time. As they grow, they make decisions, they evolve, sometimes they lose what made them special, and sometimes they have to rebuild the trust they once had. DevaCurl helped shape the curly hair industry. Today, it's still here. People still buy it, people still use it, but it occupies a very different place than it did 10 or 15 years ago. And I think that's what makes its story so interesting. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe. Then check out the companion blog post linked below, where I'll include additional details, a timeline of events, and resources if you'd like to learn more. You can also follow me on Pinterest for more curly hair education and guides. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.